Hello, everyone. Welcome to the As It Were podcast. Today I'll be reading my statement of purpose accepted by Carnegie Mellon, the University of Arizona, and the University of New Mexico for doctoral studies. Afterwards, I also go over my personal advice for writing statements of purpose, which I made sure is new advice from similar videos on the topic. On a cool October day in 1973, police arrested Domingo Lezama at his sawmill in the Valdivian rainforest of Los Rios, Chile. They detained him among 1,000 political prisoners on Isla Teja, an island in the Patagonian city of Valdivia. Lezama recalled that the prisoners sang in protest, imagining Chile as a destroyed garden. Sheltering in the mountains, Americo Cienfuegos poeticized workers' blood as lava flowing from Andean forests. They were not alone. From 1970, thousands of Chileans participated in one of the largest grassroots revolutionary movements in history. Dubbed the Revolution from Below, it was ended by military coup on September 11, 1973. Los Rios was a center of the revolution from below, containing the million-acre socialized Panguipulli forestry complex. I learned the solemn presence Valdivia's jail still has. After waiting in the South Chilean rain while my identity was processed, I ascended to my apartment. I hoped to see the shoreline where 2 centuries earlier Charles Darwin stepped off the Beagle. From the window, the ruins of the abandoned prison loomed in the fog. Every day for a semester, I saw where hundreds were tortured by the Chilean military. The memory of the overthrown revolution is present across Chile, contributing to millions protesting during the pandemic and initiating an ongoing battle to reform Chile's constitution. As Article 1 of Chile's rejected 2022 constitution sought the creation of the world's first ecological state, it is difficult not to think of Cienfuegos' call to sow fire in the night until it buds. The historiography of the revolution from below examines its daily social sphere, showing how factors like housing, wages, or food guided Chilean socialism. It does not examine why workers like Lezama and Cienfuegos remembered their struggle by their quotidian environment, nor how Chilean socialists shaped their environment and vice versa. Not only a social project, Panguipulli also sought sustainable forestry. The historiography of Panguipulli is limited. A chapter by Thomas Klubach and 2 articles by Jose Barrena Ruiz et al. And Claudio Robles Ortiz all reflect social foci. Researching the daily environmental stories of the revolution from below enriches the historiography by not only filling a gap, but also by helping illuminate wider questions. How can efforts to democratize property ownership impact conservation efforts? How do geographic spaces and environmental consciousness influence the course of revolution? How does forestry commodification and decommodification impact social change? I wish to use largely untouched sources. They include writing by Osvaldo Alvarado, the former head of Panguipulli, human rights NGOs like Codepu, workers like Cienfuegos, and oral interviews. Sources may be found in online archives, national archives, and local archives like Valdivia's. This research can apply for extensive funding grants offered by organizations like the Rainforest Alliance, Latin American Perspectives, and the Forest History Society. My honors thesis focused on the voices of everyday Chileans, examining interviews with political prisoners. I argued that daily musical expressions were a survival strategy against state oppression. Overcoming the struggles of any thesis, it won a departmental award for best paper and 2 funding grants. I worked as a research assistant on 4 projects, primarily finding, organizing, and digitizing primary sources for academics. I completed a fellowship for museum researching individuals who sought freedom in Albany along the Underground Railroad, publishing my findings and providing a series of lectures for diverse museum audiences. I graduated early and summa cum laude through my department's honors and combined BA/MA programs, completing my master's in 4 years instead of the expected 6. I minored in and know Spanish. These experiences demonstrate my skills in historical research and scholarly collaboration. With exceptional faculty and resources, there's no better place to stand at the crossroads of Latin American social environmental history than Carnegie Mellon. I am in contact with Professor Solari as my interests closely match with his expertise in Patagonian social environmental history, particularly of environmental commodification as in creatures of fashion. Broadly, my interests in social environmental history fits the research of numerous CMU professors, including Professor Ice, Professor Russell, Professor Riley, Professor Owen, and Professor Throat. CMU has robust organizations for opportunities in interdisciplinary research and public outreach to promote my growth, such as the Steinbrenner Institute for Environmental Education. Lastly, CMU's archives include holdings relevant to research on Chile's 20th century, such as the collection Chile Records of the U.S. State Department. I will carry my earned knowledge and skills into my professional future as an academic, perhaps like Cienfuegos to sow fire until it buds. So now what would be my advice? Be an academic. First, collaborate. Have as many qualified eyes read your statement of purpose as possible. A good place to start is your undergraduate advisor, but I have two more examples of people I found helpful. For my doctorate, I decided to pivot into environmental history, and the professor I took a research methods class with happened to be an environmental historian. On top of this, he also had a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. Don't be afraid to ask professors who are more closely aligned to your subfield or just trained writers for advice. For the other example, a first-year PhD student at Harvard reached out to me on Reddit and offered to read my statement, which I'm forever grateful for. She was still a historian, but in a different subfield, so could provide an intelligent but uneducated take on if what I'm saying is understandable to a general audience of historians unfamiliar with my topic. Connecting with another junior scholar online was also helpful compared to, say, having a friend read it, since there was less pressure around, is this person just going to say that it's good since I'm their friend? Second, be stubborn. While it's good to get multiple perspectives on things, not all of the advice you're given is going to be useful. Make sure to consciously understand what they're suggesting, why they're suggesting it, and don't feel bad to reject their advice if it just doesn't work for your goals. For example, I didn't take a lot of advice from the Harvard student who read my statement, but she probably gave me the single most useful help, which was highlighting where I was doing a bad job at explaining why my research idea is relevant. Third, talk about meta-academic worries. Have a brief review of literature. Talk about potential outside funding sources. Highlight archives at the university useful to your work, and other things like that. Fourth, be prepared for rejection. Graduate applications are brutal. Especially in the humanities, there's so many qualified candidates and not enough funding that unfortunately vibes and departmental politics are probably why you're going to be rejected. One of my thesis advisors was rejected from every university they applied to for the first time. I was too. Moreover, I also applied to Cornell, and while rejected, my potential advisor there flatly told me that I wasn't accepted just since no one from my subfield was accepted that year, not since my application had any faults. And I actually thought that my Carnegie Statement of Purpose was worse than my Cornell one. But unfortunately, that sort of rejection is just common in academia. Fungibility. Unless you're insanely lucky or a demigod, you'll have to apply to a good number of universities to get in. For myself, I applied to 15, meaning my success rate was only 20%. To still have a life while you're applying to graduate school, I suggest picking one topic and only applying to departments relevant to that topic so you can keep about 80% of the statement of purpose the same across applications. Most of the changes will be where you explain why the particular department is the one for you, but don't stop there. Go through your statement of purpose and see if there's anything in your story that you can slightly tweak to better fit the department. For instance, I saw that at Carnegie Mellon, professors tended to use environmental history in their bio, while at Cornell they tended to use geographic history. These are synonyms, but just replacing everywhere I put environmental to geographic made me sound more like I'm having a Cornell conversation. Creating a fungible application will save you so much time. Tell a compelling story. Obviously, this is a technical document, but do not shy from creative writing tricks, especially if you're in the humanities like myself. Being a good writer will make your application pop out. For example, I had my hook about Cienfuegos and Lezama, which provided me with two characters I could bring up again in my conclusion. I both had a detached academic perspective, but I also explained how I personally witnessed the topic. I also used strong imagery like ruins and the fog. One last tip here is I'm a big believer in the old creative writing joke of sorry if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. I started with the most restrictive statement of purpose by word count, which actually was Carnegie Mellon's at I believe around 800 words. Doing that really forced me to cut off the fat and explain what's most important concretely. Starting with the hardest word limit also gives a strong foundation to tweak for more forgiving departments later on. It's often easier to expand than cut writing. Thank you to anyone who came this far into the video. I hope that this was helpful. My own background is as a first-generation academic whose undergrad was at a relatively no-name public research university, so I know I would have appreciated advice like this. And do feel free to check out our other episodes, which so far have covered the history of antinatalism and the most famous revolutionary you haven't heard of, Lajos Kossuth. Our next planned episode is on the Beaver Wars.